The courtroom was unusually packed that morning. The heavy wooden doors creaked as people shuffled inside, whispering in low tones. Sunlight streamed through tall, dust-flecked windows, slicing across the oak-paneled walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch across the benches like fingers of judgment. The air felt thick, not just from the lingering smell of old books and polished wood, but from the anticipation, the kind that made people lean in and hold their breath, as though something historic was about to happen. No one could have guessed that the most powerful words that day would not come from a seasoned lawyer in a press suit or from the lips of the stern judge seated high above, but from the trembling voice of an 8-year-old boy sitting quietly at the front row beside his mother. His name was Malik Johnson, and though his sneakers were scuffed and his hands fidgeted nervously in his lap, his eyes burned with a determination that far outweighed his small frame. Those who noticed him smirked, whispering to one another, "What's that kid doing here? This is no place for children." They didn't know that Malik wasn't here to spectate. He was here to fight. The case was already the talk of the town. Angela Johnson, Malik's mother, was accused of a crime she swore she didn't commit, embezzling money from the very law firm where she worked tirelessly as a paralegal. The irony of being charged in the same courthouse, where she had once filed motions and carried stacks of documents, wasn't lost on her. She had always been the quiet, dependable worker, the one who stayed late, who sacrificed weekends, who took the jobs others avoided. But now, because money had gone missing, because she was a single black mother who had no one powerful to stand behind her, she became the convenient scapegoat. The prosecutor, a man named Daniel Reeves, thrived on cases like this. He was sharp, arrogant, and loved the performance of law more than justice itself. His slicked-back hair, his custom-tailored navy suit, and his smug grin gave him the look of someone who had never lost a battle and never intended to. He looked at Angela like she was already guilty, like her fate was sealed the moment the charges were filed. And why wouldn't he? To him, this was just another notch on his belt. Another victory for his record. Angela sat quietly, her wrists pressed tightly together as though she wanted to hold herself from falling apart. She whispered to Malik, "Baby, remember what I said? No matter what happens, you need to stay calm, okay?" Her voice quivered, though she tried to hide it behind a weak smile. Malik nodded, but his little fists clenched at his sides. He hated seeing his mother like this, tired, worried, painted as a criminal when he knew better than anyone how hard she worked just to keep food on the table. He had heard her cry late at night, thinking he was asleep. He had seen her skip meals so that he could eat. He had watched her patch holes in her shoes with tape so she wouldn't have to buy new ones. And now these people, these strangers in their fancy clothes, are saying she was a thief. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel to call the room to order. He was an older man, paralyzed from the waist down, his wheelchair positioned just behind the towering wooden desk. Years of presiding over countless cases had given him a hardened exterior. His face was lined deeply, his silver eyebrows furrowed in a near-permanent frown. Some whispered that he had grown cynical, that he no longer believed in the good of people. "Court is now in session," he announced, his voice echoing. Daniel Reeves rose confidently. "Your Honor, the evidence against Ms. Johnson is overwhelming. Thousands of dollars vanished from her department, and who had access to those accounts? None other than the defendant. Bank records, email correspondences, and testimony from her superiors make it clear. She abused her position and must face the consequences." He paced slowly, making sure every juror's eye followed him. His words dripped with calculated conviction. "Angela's public defender?" Mr. Collins was a weary man who looked as though he'd been drowning in cases for far too long. His suit was wrinkled, his notes disorganized, his tone lacking fire. He cleared his throat and mumbled, "Your Honor, the defense maintains that Ms. Johnson is innocent. We ask the jury to keep an open mind as we present evidence that—" But Reeves cut him off, smirking. "Open mind. The facts speak louder than your client's excuses." The jury chuckled quietly. A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom. Even the judge's lips twitched into what looked dangerously close to amusement. Angela's shoulders sank, shame burning her cheeks. Malik's small hands gripped the wooden bench so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wanted to scream, to tell them they were wrong, but what could an 8-year-old do in a courtroom filled with adults who thought they knew better? Still, something stirred inside him that he couldn't ignore. The trial went on, and the more Reeves spoke, the more the courtroom seemed convinced. He twisted words, cherry-picked evidence, painted Angela as careless and greedy. Malik watched his mother sink lower in her chair, each accusation slicing into her like a blade. Finally, recess was called. As the crowd spilled into the hallways, people murmured, "She doesn't stand a chance." Others shook their heads, pitying but not defending her. Malik tugged at his mother's sleeve. "Mom, you can't let them do this to you. You didn't do anything wrong. Why isn't your lawyer fighting harder?" His eyes filled with tears of anger. Angela knelt down, brushing a hand over his cheek. "Sweetheart, sometimes life isn't fair. Sometimes people don't listen no matter how hard you try." Malik shook his head furiously. "No, they have to listen. They just don't know the truth yet." That night, while Angela slept restlessly, Malik crept out of bed. He pulled out the stack of papers he had secretly collected copies of his mom's emails. Schedules, notes she had written for herself. He had watched her work long enough to know her habits, and something about Reeves's accusations didn't add up. His little brow furrowed as he traced the patterns with his finger. "They're wrong," he whispered. "I know they're wrong." The next day, court resumed. Reeves strutted in like a man already celebrating victory. The defense fumbled again, unable to keep pace. Just when it seemed Angela's fate was sealed, a small voice pierced the silence. "Excuse me, Your Honor?" Gasps echoed through the room. Standing barely tall enough to be seen over the bench was Malik. His heart pounded, but his eyes were steady. I need to say something." Judge Whitmore arched a skeptical brow. "And who exactly are you?" "I'm Malik Johnson," the boy said firmly, though his voice shook. "Angela Johnson is my mom. And I know she's innocent," Laughter erupted. The courtroom buzzed with disbelief. Reeves smirked, shaking his head as though the interruption was beneath him. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We can't take testimony from a child." But Malik didn't sit down. He straightened his small shoulders, his eyes never leaving the judge's. "I know I'm just a kid. But I've been paying attention, and I can prove she didn't steal that money." The laughter died down to murmurs. Even the judge seemed taken aback. His gavel hovered in the air as he studied the boy. There was something in Malik's voice, an unshakable conviction that cut through the cynicism. Through the noise, for the first time, the courtroom fell into a tense silence. Could it be possible? Could a child really defend his mother in front of a judge and jury? And yet, in that silence, in the wide-eyed stares, one truth became undeniable. This boy was not going to back down. The courtroom was dead silent after Malik's declaration. For a long moment, even Judge Whitmore just stared at the boy, his gavel froze in midair. The silence stretched so long that you could hear the distant hum of the courthouse's old fluorescent lights. Then, laughter erupted again. Not from everyone this time, but from enough people that Malik's little chest tightened. Reeves leaned against the prosecution's table with his arms crossed, grinning smugly. "Your Honor, really? Are we going to indulge the fantasies of a child? This is a courtroom, not a school play." But Malik didn't flinch. His small hands gripped the edge of the defense table, and his eyes locked on the judge. "Please, Your Honor, just let me speak. If I'm wrong, then everyone can laugh. But if I'm right, then you'll know my mom's innocent." The words were bold, maybe even foolish, but there was something disarming about them. The confidence of a boy who had nothing to lose. Judge Whitmore's lips tightened, his jaw working. Finally, he lowered his gavel. "Mr. Reeves, as unusual as this is, the court will allow the boy to say his piece. 5 minutes. And that's generous." Gasps rippled through the room. Angela's eyes widened in horror. "No, Malik," she whispered, tugging at his sleeve. "This isn't your burden. Please sit down." But Malik shook his head. "Mom, I can do this." Reeves smirked and gestured dramatically toward the boy. "By all means. Let's hear what our pint-sized lawyer has to say." The jury chuckled again, but more uneasily this time. Something in Malik's eyes unsettled them. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't performing. He was deadly serious. Malik swallowed hard and took a step forward. His small sneakers squeaked against the polished floor. "Mr. Reeves says my mom stole the money. But the times he says she was making those transfers, she wasn't even at work. She was with me." The courtroom rustled with whispers. Reeves waved dismissively. "Oh, come now. Alibis from an 8-year-old? Your Honor," but Malik raised his voice louder than anyone expected. "I have proof." The silence that followed was heavier this time. Even Reeves's smirk faltered slightly. Malik reached into his backpack, pulling out a worn spiral notebook and several crumpled papers. His little fingers trembled, but he laid the papers flat on the defense table. These are my mom's notes. She writes down everything she has to do. Every meeting, every errand. She even writes down when she picks me up from school. And I keep my own notes too. Homework assignments, projects, they match. On the days the money went missing, she wasn't at the office. She was with me at the library, helping me study for my spelling test. I still have the test paper with the date on it. He held up the test sheet, the childish handwriting circled in red ink. The courtroom leaned forward. A murmur spread like wildfire. Angela covered her mouth with her hand, tears brimming. She whispered, "Oh, Malik." The judge adjusted his glasses and motioned for the bailiff to collect the papers. Reeves scoffed, trying to recover his composure. "Your Honor, this is absurd. Children fabricate stories all the time. And those notes could have been written at any point." But Malik didn't let him finish. His voice cracked but grew stronger. "You're wrong. My mom's been working there for years. She never even had access to the accounts they're talking about. Only her boss did. But no one's looking at him because it's easier to blame us. Because we're the ones with no money, no power." The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Some jurors shifted uncomfortably. One woman dabbed her eyes with a tissue. Reeves slammed his hand on the table. "Enough of this. This child has no idea how the law works." Malik spun toward him, fire blazing in his eyes. "I know enough to see when someone's lying. You're supposed to find the truth, not just win." The room gasped again. Judge Whitmore's gaze flickered toward Reeves. For the first time, his mask of composure cracked. Angela tried to pull Malik back to his seat, whispering frantically, "Baby, please, don't push too far." But Malik gently placed his hand over hers and whispered back, "Mom, if I don't fight for you, who will?" The judge banged his gavel. "Court will recess. We will reconvene after lunch. And Mr. Reeves?" His voice dropped into a warning tone. "You'd better have something stronger than insults when we return." The courtroom erupted in chatter as people filed out. But their whispers were different now. No one was laughing. They were intrigued, unsettled. The image of a boy standing up to a seasoned prosecutor was burned into their minds. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed like vultures. Cameras flashed, microphones shoved into Angela's face. "Ma'am, how does it feel to have your son defend you? Do you think this will change the jury's mind?" Angela tried to shield Malik, but he clung to her side, chin high. "We just want the truth," he said simply. The cameras ate it up. Reeves, storming past with his entourage, sneered, "Pathetic stunt. That kid won't save you." But his voice carried less confidence than before. Inside, in a quiet hallway, Angela knelt before her son. Her eyes glistened with tears as she cupped his face. "Why did you do that, Malik? You could have made things worse." Malik's eyes filled with determination. "Because I couldn't just sit there, Mom. I've seen how hard you work. I've seen you cry when no one's looking. They don't know you like I do. They don't care, but I do. And if they won't fight for you, then I will." Angela pulled him into her arms, holding him tightly as though he might vanish. "You're just a boy," she whispered. "No," Malik said softly. "I'm your son, and that's enough." When the court reconvened, the tension was thicker than ever. People whispered, wondering what would happen next. Reeves came prepared with a smug smile and new evidence. Determined to crush the boy's spirit, he presented bank statements, pointing dramatically to highlighted transactions. "These transfers were made with Ms. Johnson's login credentials. Unless her son wants us to believe an invisible man used her account, the facts are clear." The jury nodded reluctantly. Reeves straightened his tie, satisfied, but Malik stood again. This time, no one laughed. They watched. "They waited, Your Honor," Malik said, his voice steadier now. "I know my mom didn't do it, and I think I know who did." The room went still. Reeves froze mid-grin. Every time the money was transferred, Malik continued, "My mom's boss, Mr. Henderson, told her to leave early to pick me up. She wrote it in her notes. He knew she wouldn't be at her desk. And he's the only other one with access to her login. He used her account so he wouldn't get caught." The accusation hit like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted. Even the jurors leaned forward, wide-eyed. Reeves barked, "This is outrageous. Pure speculation." But Malik pointed to the bank records. "Look closer. Every transfer happened within 15 minutes of her leaving the office. How would anyone else know exactly when she wasn't there? Unless it was the person who told her to leave." He turned toward the jury, his small voice echoing with surprising strength. My mom's not a thief. She's a victim. And if you really care about justice, then look at the people with power, not just the ones who can't fight back. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Judge Whitmore leaned back in his wheelchair, his expression unreadable. But there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of respect. Angela buried her face in her hands, overwhelmed. She had come to court expecting humiliation, maybe even prison. But her son, her 8-year-old boy, had turned the tide. And yet the fight wasn't over. Reeves's face darkened, and his voice dripped with venom. Mark my words, Your Honor. This circus will not distract from the facts. I will prove this woman guilty if it's the last thing I do. But Malik's words had planted a seed of doubt, one that Reeves couldn't unroot so easily. That night, in their small apartment, Angela tucked Malik into bed. She brushed a hand over his hair, her eyes full of gratitude and fear all at once. You were so brave today, she whispered. But you don't know how dangerous this is. Men like Reeves don't like losing. He won't stop until he destroys us. Malik sat up, his eyes glistening. Then we won't stop either. We have to fight. For the truth? Angela kissed his forehead, tears slipping down her cheeks. You're too young to carry this weight. But Malik shook his head. I'm not too young to know what's right. As the city outside buzzed with life. The Johnsons prepared for another day in court, a day that would either crush them or set them free. And somewhere, deep in the heart of Judge Whitmore, something stirred. For the first time in years, he wondered if maybe justice still meant something. The third day of the trial dawned heavy and gray. Clouds pressed low against the courthouse dome. The drizzle coated the streets like the sky itself knew the storm brewing inside. Reporters gathered even earlier, their cameras pointed at the doors, waiting for the boy who had become the town's unlikely hero. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. The jurors whispered among themselves. Strangers filled the back rows, just to witness what would happen next. Even the clerks and bailiffs carried themselves differently, as though they sensed history unfolding. Angela sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Malik squeezed her fingers for courage. She bent toward him, whispering, no matter what happens. I'm proud of you, her voice cracked, and she brushed away tears quickly, not wanting him to see her fear. But Malik only smiled softly, his eyes steady. We're going to win, Mom. I know it. At the front, Daniel Reeves adjusted his tie, his face pale but still wearing that cocky half-smile. He had spent the night gathering more evidence, determined to crush the boy's courage once and for all. Today he would prove that Angela was guilty beyond a shadow of a doubt, or at least that's what he told himself. When Judge Whitmore rolled in, silence fell. His gavel cracked like thunder. Court is now in session. Let us proceed. Reeves shot to his feet. Your Honor, yesterday we indulged a child's wild imagination. But today, we return to the facts. Bank records. Login data. Evidence that points clearly, unmistakably, to the defendant. He slapped a folder onto the table, papers fanning out dramatically. Ms. Johnson's password was used, her account accessed, her credentials authenticated. No amount of childish storytelling changes that. He turned toward the jury, his voice rising. The law does not bend for sentiment. The law does not bow to theatrics. Justice demands we convict. He sat with a flourish, convinced he had regained control, but Malik rose quietly from his seat. The hush that fell was immediate. This time no one laughed. Every pair of eyes followed the boy as he carried his notebook to the center of the courtroom. His small frame seemed dwarfed by the high ceilings and heavy oak furniture, yet his presence commanded the space. Your Honor, he began, his voice steady. I looked at those records too, and something doesn't make sense. The judge raised an eyebrow. Go on. Malik flipped open his notebook. His handwriting was messy, but his mind was sharp. Every time my mom's account was used, the login came from her office computer. But my mom doesn't know how to work remote access. She always asks me for help with email, remember? He turned toward his mother with a small smile, and she nodded tearfully. The jury chuckled softly. A few even smiled, but Malik wasn't finished. His face grew serious again. Her boss, Mr. Henderson, does know. He's the one who taught her how to use the system. If someone wanted to frame her, all they had to do was use her computer. And who else has keys to her office? The room stiffened. Even Reeves shifted uncomfortably. And there's more. Malik pressed on. He held up a printed email, shaky in his small hands. This is an email my mom got from Mr. Henderson. He told her to leave early on the exact same days the money went missing. Every single time. It's too perfect to be an accident. Gasps filled the courtroom. The jury leaned forward. Reporters scribbled furiously. Angela's lips trembled as she whispered, "How did you?" Malik's eyes never left the judge's. "I found it in her scent folder." "She saves everything." Reeves shot up, red-faced. "Objection. This is inadmissible." A child rifling through emails, but Judge Whitmore's gavel cracked down hard. "Sit down, Mr. Reeves. The boy is presenting information directly relevant to the case, and unless you can refute it, the court will consider it." Reeves sank into his chair, sweat shining on his forehead. Malik turned back to the jury. His little chest heaved, but his voice didn't waver. "My mom's not guilty. She's being set up by the person who had the most to gain. And everyone keeps ignoring it because it's easier to blame someone who doesn't have power. But the truth matters. My mom taught me that." For a long moment, silence blanketed the room. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. Then slowly, Judge Whitmore leaned forward in his wheelchair. His deep voice broke the stillness. "Mr. Reeves," he said, his eyes sharp, "bring Mr. Henderson to this court immediately." The following day, Mr. Henderson sat at the witness stand, his face pale and his forehead glistening. He shifted uncomfortably as Reeves tried to guide him through testimony, but the cracks showed quickly. His answers contradicted. His tone wavered. And when Malik, with trembling courage, asked permission to cross-examine, the court erupted in murmurs of disbelief. Judge Whitmore granted it with a solemn nod. "Proceed, young man." Malik clutched his notebook and walked slowly toward Henderson. His voice was soft but piercing. "Mr. Henderson, why did you tell my mom to leave early, every time the money went missing?" Henderson's eyes darted nervously. "I don't recall." "Yes, you do," Malik said firmly, holding up the email printouts. "You sent these. They have your name on them." The courtroom buzzed. Henderson stammered, "That doesn't prove anything." Malik took a deep breath. His next words carried weight beyond his years. "Then why was the money transferred only during those times? Why not when she was at her desk?" "Because you needed her gone. You used her computer? You used her password. You framed her." Henderson's face crumbled. He opened his mouth, closed it, then glanced helplessly toward Reeves, who sat frozen in silence. The jury murmured louder, their eyes hardening. Finally, Judge Whitmore's gavel silenced the room. He leaned forward, his voice cold. "Mr. Henderson, do you deny these accusations under oath?" Henderson's mouth opened, but no words came. Sweat poured down his temples, and in that silence his guilt screamed louder than any confession. The judge's eyes narrowed. "Bailiff, take him into custody for further investigation." Gasps erupted. The courtroom exploded into noise. Reporters rushed to the exits. Angela collapsed into her chair, sobbing with relief. Malik threw his arms around her, burying his face in her chest as she held him tight. Judge Whitmore raised his gavel again. "Order! Order in the court." When the noise subsided, he turned his gaze toward Angela. For the first time, the hardened lines of his face softened. "Ms. Johnson," he said firmly, "you are hereby cleared of all charges. This court owes you an apology." Tears streamed down Angela's face as she clutched her son. Malik's smile glowed brighter than the chandeliers overhead. Outside, the courthouse steps overflowed with cameras and microphones. The world wanted to hear from the boy who had outsmarted a system built against him. Reporters shouted his name, but Malik just held his mother's hand tightly and whispered, "Can we just go home?" Angela nodded, smiling through her tears. "Yes, baby. Let's go home." But before they left, Judge Whitmore rolled out to meet them. His eyes, usually stern and cold, now carried a warmth Malik had never seen. He extended his hand toward the boy. "Young man, you reminded me today why I became a judge in the first place. I thought I'd seen it all. I thought I was too old to be surprised. But you," his voice thickened with emotion, "you gave me hope again." Malik shook the judge's hand firmly, his small fingers gripping the older man's. "Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted people to know the truth." The judge nodded solemnly, "And you made sure they did." As Malik and Angela walked down the courthouse steps, the crowd parted for them. No one laughed anymore. They stared in awe, in admiration, in respect. A boy had stood against arrogance. A mother had been saved. And justice, long forgotten, had finally been remembered. This story reminds us that courage has no age. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest truth. And sometimes, when the world seems stacked against us, it only takes one brave heart to change everything. Never underestimate those who fight with love, because love, more than power or position, is what makes justice possible.